Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Lexington Times and chairman of the board of LexMedia. I want to welcome you to another segment of Coffee with the Candidates. I like to say at the start of these programs, I'm delighted that we're able to bring you this format because we have so many good people running for public office. Lexington is indeed fortunate to have so many folks that are interested in civic affairs and they're interested in serving the community. Whether it be planning board, as we're going to talk about today, or the board of select board. I'm going to get that right hard at some point.
After so many years.
School committee. But at any rate, we're delighted to bring an opportunities for you to learn more about each of the candidates. And with that, I want to introduce an old friend of mine, Tina McBride. We both have something in common. We both are Lexington natives. We grew up here. You were born and raised. I know you spent a few years away, but then came back. So you're from here, right?
I'm from here.
Yeah, and
planted.
Yeah, when you talk from the heart, you really talk as somebody who has sort of seen all of the changes and the things that have happened in the community, good, bad, or indifferent, right? Mm-hmm. So you're seeking a seat on the planning board. I know you ran last time and just barely made it, and barely missed it, I should say. But you feel passionate about it enough so that you're back this year. There's an open seat. I guess Robert Peters decided not to seek re-election, so that creates an opportunity. So I'm glad to see you running because I know you're passionate about this. Let's see, I'll just remind people you're a town meeting member since 2018, but that's not kind of where you got your start. You were telling me earlier that, in 2014, you had your first citizens article, and that had to do with the demolition delay extension. And I'd like to start there because, there's a lot to talk about with the MBTA and all of this stuff, but I want to start with your passion because when you came back, you had noticed a lot of changes in Lexington, the size of houses, the absence of certain houses. And that was important to you. So the demolition delay, you tell me a little bit about why you got passionate about filing the citizens article and specifically the demolition delay.
So actually back in 1984, I had left in 82 when I graduated from LHS, but back in 84, they started the demolition delay. And it specifically had to do with houses built before a certain time, older homes that were being torn down at an alarming rate. Alarming for them back in 84. And the idea was that by putting a demolition delay on a certain group of housing, that you could prevent the erasure of those pages from our history book. Right. Those were important periods. GI Bill capes, Depression era buildings, workforce housing from an earlier time, in addition to really old homes built in the 17 and 1800s. And at the time they said, well, you can't do that because it will gut the real estate market. It didn't. Our real estate market was fine. When I moved back in 2000, it was alarming to me that we were losing almost 100 houses a year to this same process. The idea that waiting a year could slow things down was great back in the 80s. But then as time moved on, a 1-year delay really wasn't enough. There was a lot of money to be had in demolishing and then replacing with houses that were 2, 3, 4 times the size. Right. So it's something that concerned me a lot because growing up, you and I know in East Lexington, this was a blue-collar, these were blue-collar neighborhoods. A lot of immigrants, a lot of workforce housing, and it was, this has been diminishing since then.
East of Maple Street. I grew up east of Maple Street.
Yes, and we know it's been diminishing since then. And so that was of great concern to me because I feel like we should continue to be a town where we have, all these different demographics.
Right.
And so I tried to do the demolition delay. It failed, unfortunately. But this was like the first idea that I had.
But you planted a seed.
I hope so.
I like to think so.
It did pass. It did pass.
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually, someone else took it up, and it did pass eventually. So now it's at 21 months. But that was the first attempt. I really care about this middle, the missing. They call it the missing middle,
Right.
which I'm going to go there. MBTA communities.
Right.
The MBTA Communities Act was an attempt by the state to create more housing. We have a terrible housing shortage in Massachusetts.
And more dense housing as a concept is fundamentally a good thing.
Yeah.
But
It is fundamentally a good thing. But what the state asked us was for 50 acres with the allowance of 15 units per acre. And it had to be on bus routes, which makes a lot of sense for people that, you know,
access to public transit, of course, yeah.
We're trying to decrease, if we're going to be increasing our density, we have to give people an alternative on how to get around. If it's on public access, public transportation, that's better. But the problem with the MBTA communities is that it really is not addressing some of the things that we care most about in Lexington. The comprehensive plan, every time it comes out, some of the biggest concerns that people talk about is affordable housing or more affordability, workforce housing, senior housing, things like that. So while the MBTA Communities Act was an attempt to create more housing, it wasn't necessarily geared towards what we need in Lexington, or what we say we want.
Right.
And so
And we went way above and beyond what the state was asking.
Yes, we did.
That's the point you're going to make, right?
yeah, the tool was it was for one thing, and we were hoping that it was going to be for something else, and it really. It not only was not going to give us what we said we wanted, but additionally, it prevents us from using. Once we've made those acres committed to the MBTA community, it kind of takes them off the table for creating more housing opportunities that we want.
Right.
We can explore 40R, we can explore 40S, where we can require higher amounts of affordable housing. The MBTA communities initially said if a town wants to ask for affordable, they can ask for 10%. We pushed it on big developments up to 15.
Right.
But that's not what it was originally designed for. If we want what we say we want, we can look at 40R, we can look at 40S, we can look at friendly 40Bs. I want to look at...
Is there such a thing as a friendly 40B?
There is.
I'm asking somewhat
If you're-
facetiously.
Yes, if you are above, if you're above, the cutoff is 10% affordable. And
Right.
so we're
We've
well
been
above
above
that
that.
right now.
Right.
So we could actually be proactive and start to explore that. I also want to look at workforce housing specifically, excuse me, and age restricted housing. You know, we need our seniors.
Right.
Someone had mentioned that there was a calcification of Lexington, which was appalling to me because we run on seniors in Lexington. I mean, we have volunteer boards, and those are going to be filled mostly by seniors who have institutional knowledge that we value in Lexington, or need to value more. They have the time to do it. They have the wisdom of years of experience. So I'd like to create opportunities to keep seniors in our community.
Right. And we're making it more and more difficult for them as we're incurring higher costs. You know, we're doing the things we need to do with new high schools and police stations and fire stations. That brings additional costs, and it brings pressure to bear financially on a lot of these seniors who are in their, as you say, their World War II era homes. The greatest generation.
Greatest generation.
You know, GI Bill homes and others, because that's where they raise their families, and they're satisfied with that, and they're comfortable at these homes. I grew up in a home, a modified 2-bedroom Cape on Lowell Street. We had at one point 12 people living there. 7 children, 2 parents, a great aunt, and 2 grandparents. And we had a great. I had a great childhood. I loved it, and you know it's different now. You know, and but our seniors are so important to us in the community, as you say, and I don't want them to feel that they're, you know, that they're. I don't want to see them stressed and other, you know.
I don't want them to be left with no alternatives.
With no alternatives.
Other than to leave.
And we do have 3 senior facilities, you know, affordable housing for seniors, but they're full.
Yep.
And there are waiting lists.
Yep.
And we need more, and we do. I agree with you. I think we need to do more for our seniors. And you talk about workforce housing. You know, the you know, teachers and firefighters and police officers. I mean, they're
people that we grew up with.
Right. Being able to work and live in the community. I had so many teachers, as you did when at Lexington schools, that lived here in Lexington.
Yep.
It's not the case anymore.
They can't. It's not an option for them.
So how do we fix that though? What is the answer to that?
40B is, you know, there are things you can work with. 40R and 40S, where we can require much higher
Courtyard Place, the last 40B project that I can remember is Courtyard Place on Lowell Street.
That was unfriendly.
It was unfriendly, but it was classified 40B. I don't know what you mean by the difference between friendly and unfriendly.
The difference is if you are below the 10%.
Right.
There's fewer tools that we can use to get what we want. We can ask for things as a town. If we're above the 10%. And
we can, so we have more of a say in the permitting process?
Right.
Instead of one comprehensive permit?
Right, and then something else.
And the reason I say that, what I want to point out is those came on the market at a time for over $1 million a piece. A 40B project, so when we talk about affordability, even at $1 million, which is below the average home price in Lexington now, that's still difficult to afford. I mean, it's not affordable. It may be attainable, but it's not affordable.
That's the thing. When people talk about MBTA community as the panacea, you know, we need more housing. We need more housing. We do. We need more affordable. We need more workforce. We need more senior housing.
Home ownership opportunities.
Okay, let's go there. Okay. So back in 2015, there was. We passed we released some regulation on ADUs. So ADUs enable people to stay in their homes maybe when their children have moved out.
What is ADU?
An ADU is an accessory dwelling unit.
Right.
And it means you can portion off a part of your house or put an apartment above your garage to rent out.
By right if it's attached.
Right. So and the state has done some more regulation release as well recently. One thing I want to look at, if I'm on the planning board, I want to look at condo conversions. You know, so many of the small homes were replaced with these huge homes. If you look at condo conversions, where you can divide a house into 2 or 3 units. I mean, a 6,000 square foot house right now could fit almost 3 of my homes into it, right?
Right.
So why can't we split those up and allow a condo conversion? More rentals are great, but condo conversions enable families to purchase homes.
Right.
You know, part of the problem with rentals is that you're not creating generational wealth for families.
Well, you're not, or equity for anyone.
Exactly.
Except for the folks who don't live here, who are taking their profits and going somewhere else.
Exactly. So condo conversions would allow people to buy a home, a smaller home, but buy a home and enable them to start building some of their own nest egg.
Right. I've heard, you know, some of the arguments that I've heard about condos and 2-family homes is that they don't generate enough. It's not like they're going to generate additional revenue, you know, but they lose sight of the fact that, you know, there's almost no value in creating home ownership opportunities.
Tax revenue?
Right, because it's, you're talking about the same structure that's going to be pretty much valued at the same, maybe a little bit more, because it's like splitting a diamond, right? So it'll be maybe valued a little bit more, but by and large, it's not going to generate that much more additional revenue to help cover the ever-increasing cost of running a town like Lexington, which I think is short-sighted because, as we're talking about, home ownership opportunities. We're talking, because you can't always tie home ownership opportunities into revenue for the town.
Home
So
ownership.
I'm sorry, I keep
That
I keep reminding people I'm not running for anything, but I've got
That
you
is
here.
the
and
American dream, Jim.
Yeah.
Is to buy your own home, to own your own home.
Right.
That was what spurred my husband and I to finally stop renting when we hit this mark and went, essentially, we're homeless at the end of the month, right? You want to build equity somewhere. But it's interesting that you say that people look at it and say, okay, well, we're not creating more value for the town. John Bartenstein and Alan Levine, on the appropriation, very smart guys, and talk about like a well of knowledge. They've been around for a while, and they have seen so much in Lexington on the appropriations committee. Super smart guys, and they've done, finally, they did an analysis of the MBTA communities, which should have been done before it was ever passed.
Right.
And what they determined was, in Lexington, for every additional 1,000 units, it costs the town, the item, the additional cost is between $4 and $12 million annually. Now, everyone keeps saying Lexington's a wealthy town, and we, generally speaking, we are. I'm not wealthy. There's a lot of people that are not wealthy, but generally speaking, we can absorb something like that, but we can't do it at this rate.
Right.
1,100 units in under 2 years. It's too fast.
It's too fast.
And if
Somebody
we continue,
said it would bankrupt us if we go.
Well, it will.
Yeah.
At $4 million to $12 million per unit annually. That has the big potential to bankrupt us. And so these are things we have to consider. Part of the reason is that apartments are taxed at a much lower rate, which they should be, right?
Because their per unit value is lower and. In the equation, I think that's why, but I don't know. I'm smarter people than me have to figure that out.
Well, the point is that while condo conversions might not generate that much more tax revenue, they certainly will happen at a different rate.
Right.
It's also really good for neighborhoods because when you think about it, if you're converting a house into a condo, there's less disruption for your neighbors, for the neighborhood as a whole. It's growing out of itself, and you are creating more opportunities where there were none, but not at a rate that we cannot absorb. We can absorb that,
right?
But the
hundreds and hundreds at a time, it's
more difficult. And it taxes us. It taxes our services. It taxes our school system. It taxes our emergency services. And
infrastructure, roads, everything.
All the infrastructure. It makes sense that we look at things like that, ADUs and condo conversions, as good solutions going forward.
But we have MBTA. It's here. We have to deal with it. We've, as you mentioned, over 1,100 units are already in the pipeline. So even if
that will not change if they pass Article 2.
Right. It's because they're in. I mean, they're in by right. There's very little that comes with it. I was talking with somebody the other day during one of these interviews. There's no provision for mitigation or anything. I mean, it's take it. That's it. Not even take it or leave it, but just take it.
Right.
And that's why some of the other communities like Milton and I can't remember some of the other ones, but Milton was the one that comes to mind. They're just saying no, 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 no.
Well, they want more favorable terms.
They want,
which makes sense when you
when you
negotiate anything, right? You want the most favorable terms.
Of course, And you know, we were quick to jump on board. We were the first community to accept it at town meeting. I remember the Boston Globe article. You know, we were all praising one another. And then all of a sudden, you know, when these applications started coming in fast and furious, we're like, oh, wow, what do we do now? So now we have a special town meeting. We're going to try to address it and fix it. But for those units already accepted and approved by the planning board, that train has left the station.
They don't even have to be approved.
Mm-hmm.
If they've submitted proposals
Mm-hmm.
before the before March 17.
Mm-hmm. They don't have to be approved by the planning board?
No,
Oh,
they just
I
have
wasn't
to be.
aware of that.
They
Okay.
just have to be. It just has to be submitted by
Okay.
that time, and they can grandfather that in for 8 years.
Right,
So that could be a lot of backlog to work through.
right,
Which is why it's important that Article 2 passes.
right.
Because we have all this great new housing coming on.
Right.
We are doing our part to alleviate some of the housing shortage in the state.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are some neighbors that are feeling the burden because, you know, buildings are right, you know, very
Right.
close to their homes. And too tall.
Right.
This is when you, I want to circle back to
Yeah.
when you said we did it so quickly. Sorry.
That's okay.
When we talked about how quickly we jumped in. When the MBTA Communities bylaw was passed in Lexington, we still had another 20 months or so to comply. And I don't think we sufficiently looked at the increased height allowances and the setbacks and how they were going to affect our neighborhoods.
Right.
Because this is not just paper, right? These are people, these are our constituents, these are our
Right.
neighbors, these are our friends. And I don't think we looked sufficiently at how this was going to affect individuals around town.
Well, you and I talked about this at the beginning, that the state has a certain mandate, but we changed the setbacks, we changed the height limitations and all of that. So
Yes.
that's on us.
That's on us.
We did that to accommodate more applications. Why did that happen, in your opinion?
Gosh, that's a big ask. I'm not in
Okay.
other people's heads.
Right.
All I can say is that there were a number of us who were saying zoning should be done with the weight of the responsibility, the understanding of the weight of the responsibility. These are people's lives. These are people's every day.
Right.
There is a huge appetite for development in Lexington. And the cluster housing study group, which was pushing for this, they were saying, oh, don't worry. They were saying what the planning board was saying is that, don't worry, it'll only be between 400 to 800 units in the next 5 to 10 years.
Right.
I'm from Lexington.
Right.
And I know that was not true.
Right.
That was not going to happen. There is a huge appetite. And when you open up those floodgates,
Right.
it's going to fill very, very quickly.
Oh, are you kidding me, with the industry being what it is and people
Exactly.
finding opportunities to build in Lexington?
Exactly.
Right.
And so one of the faults for us of jumping in too quickly is that originally when the state put this out there, they said, okay, if you have retail buildings like a one-story building and a developer wants to replace it with residential, you can't require that they replace the retail. The problem for Lexington is that retail gets a higher tax rate.
Right.
So we did not want to lose that tax revenue.
Hence the village overlay?
So what they said was, if you replace the first story retail and put residential above it, you can have a bonus height.
Right.
You can have additional floors of residential. And this is why we ended
For
up...
all the projects, not just those particular projects?
for all the projects in the MBTA, and it is
Yeah.
complicated because there are a number of different, there are
Right.
different districts that have different basic zoning
Right.
to begin with, so that it wasn't the same all around.
But I just want to make
But
one thing. Go
just to
ahead.
finish that,
Yeah.
just to finish that thought, we jumped into that and said, okay, this is how we're going to solve it. We're not going to lose the retail revenue.
Right.
We're going to entice with the added height bonus. Since that time, the state said, okay, we've changed our minds. You can require that if there's retail there, you can require that they replace it with retail. We didn't need to give the added bonus height,
Right.
which robs neighbors of sunlight
Right.
and
And that's the
energy
point I
for their
wanted to
solar
make.
panels.
Because your big concern is not enough input from the people it affects. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that the people and their properties are protected from this potential growth. We have a responsibility to make sure that we have enough housing for people, but we want to be responsible about the way we approach it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because again, this is everybody's lives, right?
Right.
It's your neighborhood. It's you're coming home to your family every day. It's your
Right.
yard. It's
Right.
you came to Lexington. Whatever your reasons were, and if you come here and this is not what
Right.
not what you signed up for. That was one of my biggest issues with this whole process is
Right.
that the notification process was that you had to notify people that were in the district. There are 12 districts now because we have all those acres.
Right.
There are 12 districts, and we alerted everybody that had property in those districts. And I was pushing, saying, we need to alert all the abutters for those districts
Right.
that things are about to change for them. They could potentially have a 5-story building next to them. They could potentially have a 6-story building next to them. Things are going to change. And I was told that they were doing everything they were legally obligated to do.
Right.
And I really feel like when you're making sweeping changes like this, you have to let people know.
Right.
Because I'm a community person. I'm
Right.
all about the community and building on that. And
Right.
people reach out to me to talk about issues, and that's something I really care about.
Right.
People need to know.
And you talk
this is their
with
everyday.
people about a whole variety of issues when it comes to zoning or building or whatever. Not the least of which is important to you is sort of the environmental impact, the sustainability. I know that's an important thing, but you say people are primarily focused on MBTA. They're like singularly focused and want to talk about MBTA. The Article 2 addresses some of this. Where do you stand on Article 2?
I think Article 2 needs to be passed because, again, the rate at which the development is happening is untenable for Lexington.
Right.
We have to look at a lot of things. The setbacks get me going because it really eliminates any kind of opportunity for trees, for gardens, for small yards. And in commercial spaces where you've eliminated the setbacks to 0,
Right.
you've eliminated community space, a place where a restaurant could have some tables, a bench, people can sit and
But
have
you're
a
talking
coffee.
about reasonable, no setbacks is unreasonable. But also, in the old days, 75-foot setbacks on Hartwell Ave, that was a little unreasonable too.
Yes. Well,
Right.
the setbacks
You're talking about a reasonable setback. is okay,
75-foot setbacks were on Hartwell, but I'm talking about the 30-foot setbacks
Right.
that we had,
Right.
and that was eliminated for commercial
I
space.
understand, yeah.
Now, if you look at Lexington Center, you talked about streetscape, the work that was just done in the center. If you look at the south side of the street, you've got the sidewalk. It's kind of like right up against.
Right.
If you're pushing a stroller down, people have to step aside. If somebody's walking their dog, if someone's afraid of a dog, there's some maneuvering that needs to happen. As compared to the north side of the street, we've got room for tables, we've got rows of beautiful trees and plantings and flower beds.
The sunny side of the street.
The sunny side of the street, but it's also more community side of the street, where places, the argument for eliminating the setbacks was, well, we need to activate the street, but what activates the street more than people getting to hang out and gather together?
Right.
Those are all that's all stuff that we can look at and manage.
Yeah.
And again, to me, it's about community. And I really feel like some of the things that we can do, whether it's workforce housing or creating more age-restricted or more 40R, more 40S, where we get the state to support some of what we're doing, to support the added pressures that we're going to have as far as operating costs and everything else in terms of the town. Those are all community-minded things, and they're all better for our community. And I want to get onto the planning board so we can start addressing some of those issues.
Right. So we're going to have to wind down very, very soon. And there were a couple of quick things I want to run by you. Commercial development. So, I believe that they did find a nice balance in Lexington Center with the streetscape. They finally, got people onto the same page with the sidewalks and all of that. And as a result, we've got a beautiful downtown. We're tracking
wire cut bricks.
Yeah, wire cut bricks.
Right.
And which, by the way, I mean, Mrs. Buckley, is it Virginia Buckley?
Victoria.
Victoria Buckley. Yeah. Victoria Buckley. She worked very hard, and I tip my hat to her. Because she didn't get what she wanted, but she got a solid compromise. And but
she's a good advocate.
She's a great advocate, and but the wire cut seems to be working and all of that. That's here and there. I just I wanted to mention that because I appreciate her work. But we've got a good-looking town, and things have changed a little bit. There was a day when the HDC and the planning board, they were really restrictive about signage and this and that, and But I think people are open-minded. Blade signs are now. You can look down the street and you can identify businesses as you from 30 yards away. So how do you feel about all of this with the sort of commercial development and not more retail than anything? I mean. Do you have hope for Lexington in that regard?
I do have hope for Lexington, and I think that with the MBTA communities, we do have opportunities to have clusters of retail in different areas of town. I did not disagree with any of the districts. I had problems with the number of acres, I had problems with the height allowances, and I had problems with the reduced setbacks because that was such a burden that you're placing on neighbors and things like that. I really hope we can create some really vital, vibrant areas where that can happen. I do think that we need housing in the center. It will, if you have the opportunity to have people living where they can shop for things, it makes so much sense on a whole bunch of reasons, a whole bunch of levels. Maybe they don't have to get in their car and drive somewhere. That will reduce the density on the congestion on the streets.
Well, we're committed to it. Eric Shapiro built those condos above the old Battle Green Inn, and converted that. A lot of people were skeptical. It's worked.
It's worked.
It's worked, but we need to add more to it.
We should
somehow,
do more of that.
in a responsible way.
In a responsible way.
All right, and then finally, I want to give you an opportunity to say this because I know this is a passion of yours, sustainability and building and all of that. I want to give you an opportunity to talk to that because there's a whole segment of people in this community that want to hear about sustainability. But I have to say we are running long, so I want to just talk about that in a minute, and then we're going to give you a chance to tell people where they can learn more about you.
I compost every day at the high school. I dig in. This is something I really care about, composting, reducing waste. I'm on the board of Lex Zero Waste, and we have an amazing program called Zero to Go, where you can order your food at a restaurant, and they give it to you in stainless steel containers that you don't have to worry about, can I recycle it and this and that. It goes back to the restaurant and gets used again. So we're reducing waste that way. People should participate. Look it up. Zero to Go, Lex Zero Waste. I've been a partner with the LexCan and LPS Green teams for years. Green stuff is very much close to home. All my grandparents who were born in the 1800s went through a lot of hard times, and I was taught very much not to waste things. It's not good.
Okay.
So and green space is really close to my heart. People can look at my website. It's www.tinamcbridelex.org. And I go over a lot of the stuff that I care deeply about.
Right.
I'm a Lexingtonian at heart. I'm here for the whole. I very much care what happens to Lexington and all my neighbors and all the people that live here. And
Great. And March 3rd, that's the big day.
March 3rd, the big day. Please vote for me for planning board.
Great. Well, Tina, thank you. Appreciate it. It's always good to see you.
So nice to see you.
Yeah. Thank you.